Thriving on the present resources. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Now, it's a Depression-era slogan. Resources do matter, but they have always fluctuated, and that fluctuation occurs with need as well as want resources. A good strategy is to learn how to thrive, or at least work with the resources currently available. That's the two-sentence version, which may or may not be a sufficient resource. For those willing to read more, here's the rest. Life rarely gives you everything you want. For all we know, this squirrel, see the card image, may be fantasizing about walnuts and silently cursing the universe for giving it leftover Halloween pumpkins instead. But as far as I could tell, when I photographed this squirrel on a residential street in Denver, it seemed to be thriving on what it's got. It appeared plump and healthy with a good chance of getting through winter. But additional resources can sometimes be just the thing. Resources do matter. The squirrel would probably be much better off in a more animal social service intensive universe where, for example, a squirrel catering service dropped off a raw nut buffet several times a week. One imagines, however, that the squirrel isn't holding its breath for the buffet. My anthropomorphic impression of this squirrel was that it was pretty happily feasting on the currently available resource, leftover Halloween pumpkins. Of course, no discerning squirrel is going to mistake the raw, wet cellulose taste of pumpkin with the oily, nutty, high omega-3 richness of a good walnut. But whatever a pumpkin loses to a walnut in taste and nutrition, it more than makes up for in size. And when you are trying to build body fat to get through the winter, size does matter. In general, resources matter. Resources matter / inner self-sufficiency, Trump's circumstance, is a classic paradox. This is what I call a dynamic paradox, where each pole of the paradox is sometimes more true than the other pole. I believe most important truths exist as a double-poled paradox, the opposite of a profound truth, and is another profound truth. And each pole is more valid in some circumstances and less so in others. So you can see my philosophy, dynamic paradoxicalism, linked in the card. The dynamic paradoxicalist uses real-time global intuition plus every sort of wisdom and faculty available, and yes, that includes those disparaged and politically incorrect psychic functions, the mind and ego, and chooses where they need to be, at either of the poles of the paradox, somewhere on the spectrum between the poles, or taking the cosmic overview that unifies the duality tension. And once again, those poles are inner independence versus resource fluctuations matter. The third item, the cosmic overview, tends to get glamorized and inflated as the answer to the paradox. But the soul doesn't thrive on a mono-food diet and can't live on the rarefied cosmic overviews alone. It wants the intensity of a dynamic relationship to the paradox so it can experience the poles, the spectrum, and the cosmic overview. Don't get me wrong, I like cosmic overviews as much as the next guy, but as a dynamic paradoxicalist, I also realize that transcendence includes that which is transcended. This inclusion means that even with the cosmic overview, I'm still going to spend time on either pole of the paradox. So sometimes I need to focus on self-sufficiency when a resource isn't available, and other times I need to make an all-out effort to get a needed resource. The cosmic overview is the Taoist assumption that the universe is unfolding as it should, that resources, like everything, fluctuate, and that fluctuation is the heartbeat of life, an essential part of the dynamic aliveness and interest of incarnation. It takes times of both abundance and scarcity, along with every other sort of fluctuation, for there to be development individually and collectively. People who have lived through scarcity sometimes develop strong characters as a result. Other times, people die of a scarcity or survive it only to become obsessive and neurotic about resources during abundant times. So as much as we could glamorize and inflate self-sufficiency, a pull that could be highly beneficial if you are, for example, a well-fed American tempted to acquire luxuries via credit card debt. It is not such an attractive pull, however, if you are watching your children starve and the only self-sufficiency available is a detached acceptance of whatever comes. From the point of view of my present economic status, where I always manage to keep myself in groceries and have a certain amount of what's called leisure time, really the time to do this kind of work, an important resource distinction is the quality of the audiovisual equipment I possess, as spoiled as that might sound. For example, movies, which I increasingly watch at home, are a priceless resource, one of my most important cultural experiences. And that movies are the queen of the arts, an art form that incorporates all other art forms. Movies operate like a mass stream delivery technology. When movies are done right, they can create encompassing, life-changing experiences, participation mystique with parallel realities. When it comes to the projection or video screen on which you experience the movie, size does matter. That's why people pay to go to the movie theater. And by the way, when this card was first written, probably like 2008 or something, I emphasized movies. I was a big moviegoer. But currently, the extended story TV series have become really a more dominant art form. And when cultural historians look back at this era, like The Sopranos was a major breakthrough in this art form. They will probably view our great TV series, those that are great, as like the cathedrals of this era. It is far better to see a powerful visionary movie or TV series in high resolution on a big screen than watching it on your phone. But if I were starving, screen size would probably diminish somewhat in importance, just like eating would diminish in importance if I wasn't able to breathe. In other words, resource point of view fluctuates with resources. A cultural update, okay, and now here I'm writing about in 2024 about how TV series have become the new dominant art form. And I also need to add, especially now that I've completed my sci-fi epic, Parallel Journeys, it took me 45 years to write. Great works of fiction are their own pinnacle that do things movies and TV series can't. They exercise your imagination as you film the movie of what you're reading in your mind's eye. Parallel Journeys is written in a cinematic, immersive style with lots of visuals and first-person present tense to amplify this effect. Novels can also take you inside characters, allowing you to hear their private thoughts. Now, this can actually be pulled off in movies, but very rarely is it used. Sometimes there'll be a voiceover monologue to do this. An amazing opportunity in the evolution of motion picture technology that was abandoned happened in the early days of IMAX, and early days of IMAX 3D, actually. Instead of giving those cheap kind of disposable kind of glasses, they gave you like this whole headset that had speakers next to your ears. And what they did, I think it was a movie called, The Flight of Destiny, with either Matthew Broderick, I think was the star of it. And when he would have interior thoughts, everything else you would hear in the giant, 60,000 watt IMAX sound system. But when he had private thoughts, you'd hear them in your own ears. It was an amazing effect because it felt like you were hearing them, his thoughts inside your own mind. But they abandoned that. Also, relating the self-promoting tangent to the card topic, the self-promoting tangent being my relentless promotion of Parallel Journeys, the resources of internet and personal computing have allowed me to publish this book in multiple forms, available on Amazon and also free on this website. When I first conceived of Parallel Journeys, it was pure science fiction to imagine I could publish a book online and make it a free resource to the entire planet. Novels put the power of such creation in the hands of a single individual without great wealth, whereas movies and series require an army of people, money, and other resources few of us can command. You probably don't have that level of resources either, but without the resource of the internet and devices, you could not be consulting this oracle and the 46 years and counting of work that's gone into it. And it's actually closer to 60 years because it actually started with collecting art postcards when I was a child, and we were always going to art museums. But that story is covered if you read the Oracle history, which there's in the Oracle menu, you'll see that. Since you probably have a smartphone, you have a simplified movie studio in your pocket and the ability to command more information than any president before George W. Bush. Resources do matter, and on all sorts of scales. The hierarchy of survival needs like air, water, food, shelter obviously matters, but there is also a meaningful hierarchy of gadgets, the power objects of technological magic, those lesser rings of power. We tend to take some of this for granted. Most of us now have access to hundreds of thousands of movies. But 120 years ago, in 1887, whether you were king or robber baron, you had access to exactly 0 movies. Anyone with internet access possesses a portal to a once unimaginable abundance of information, culture, and the ability to communicate with almost anyone on the planet for little or no cost. Yeah, I know that I'm supposed to be wringing my hands about the shadowy, fractured world of internet socializing, social media, etc., and lamenting it as a cheap substitute for what internet critics call live contact, those unsanitary face-to-face 3D encounters that were favored in yesteryear. And I'm in favor of that, of course. But not too long ago were the good old days when everything was done up in wholesome country style and there were amber waves of grain and women in gingham dresses and all that. But those were also the days when your nearest neighbor might have been a 3-mile walk in the snow from your house. And although the nearest neighbor might be the Waltons family, who were just hoping you'd drop by for a spell to eat a lavish Thanksgiving dinner, it is just as likely that the next little house on the prairie might contain a guy who drinks too much moonshine and would like to beat a wife if he could get one. Since he lacks such in-house entertainment, his strongest drunken perception is that your fences encroach on his land, and amongst the limited repertoire of social skills and the communication tool of choice, the one best able to represent his linguistic and social intentionality in a world deprived of internet social experience is very likely a shotgun. So people often don't, when they're lamenting, as they should lament, the loss of social skills due to screens. Let's also remember that in earlier, more rural epochs, people's social opportunities were often extremely limited. Today, an adolescent in a rural area with a sexuality rejected by family and community can find others who share that sexuality and alienation. For all the terrible things that happen online, that happens also. When I grew up in the Bronx, back in the day, there were the kids on my block and the opportunity off block to get beaten up by children of all races and creeds and colors. Video was a one-way sort of thing. Even in New York City, there were only 7 channels, and there was no interacting with what appeared on the screen except changing between those 7 channels. I had to view in black and white. So even though I lived in this giant city, basically there was like a small town within the large city, which was like my side of one block and the other side of the block on the other side of the street. And those were like where I found the children I could play with and so forth. It was dangerous venturing out of that one protected region. And my mom, who grew up in a very small rural town, she grew up on a 10-acre chicken farm, managed to turn those 2 blocks, even in later age when the internet was widely available, into her own small town. Because when somebody moved into the block, she'd bring over like freshly baked things that she had just made, and all those people, and when she became very elderly, looked out for her and so on. She made it into another small town, like within this giant megalopolis, but she had high social skills. But thinking back to my childhood in the Bronx, which was the night before internet, when all through the house not an input device was stirring, not even a mouse. But now I live on planet Boulder, and besides local friends, I can have video conversations with fellow mutants who live thousands of miles away. And this is a kind of, how far away are you from Boulder, Colorado? I'm having a time-displaced monologue conversation with you right now. It may take a whole village to raise a child, but it may take a whole technologically enabled civilization to raise a certain type of mutant. The presence and absence of resources has shaped me in all sorts of ways, as it's shaped everybody. I am largely the mutant product of a whole technological, magic-enabled civilization. While my grandfather grew up in a Latvian village without electricity or indoor plumbing, and therefore he was a different sort of mutant. When my father was born in New York City, not exactly a backwater, there were no commercial radio stations, and yet he lived long enough to surf the internet. When I was born, Sputnik had just been launched. Walking on the moon was only 12 years away, and I never lacked for food, plumbing, or television. Younger generations have never had to endure a world without internet, but may be tormented by social media. So there are always trade-offs, the fluctuation of resources, the fluctuations of the matrix. Sometimes you need to focus on resource acquisition, but even while doing that, focus on thriving with the resources currently available. So if life gives you leftover Halloween pumpkins, then make pumpkin-flavored lemonade or write a book about how much weight you lost on a raw pumpkin diet. Properly advertised, everyone will eventually want pumpkin chai-flavored energy drinks or something like that. And with sufficient marketing skills, to paraphrase the ancient Chinese, every crisis is also a retail marketing opportunity. They say that stress is the difference between what you want and what you've got, and sometimes it's better to get what you want, and other times to want what you've got. Wanting what you got always works well as an aphorism, but unless you're a world-class Taoist master, there are going to be times where wanting what you've got just doesn't cut it. I think that a useful aphorism for the leisure class, like it's not about getting what you want, it's about wanting what you got, might not, however, be just the thing to buck up a baby dying of starvation, though that's rarer now than at any time in the past. Or someone on and it also probably wouldn't be the right thing to say to someone on a cattle train to Auschwitz. I don't know if that's really a necessary addition, but in my present circumstance, where I have a weather-resistant home filled with groceries and gadgets, wanting what I've got is a lot more viable. And in any situation where continuing to live is better than dying, there's one strategy that works if you are plant, animal, or person. A strategy that will work equally well if you are a transhumanist cyborg with a quantum neural net and titanium alloy exoskeleton, a demigod, or a walnut-deprived squirrel. Figure out how to thrive on the present resources.